right, so we have talked about slope. It's rise over run. It's also the change in y divided by the change in x. We have touched on what the y-intercept is. Does anybody remember? It's where the graph crosses the y-axis, okay? So slope is rise over run, which is the same thing as saying the change in y divided by the change in x. It's how the y is changing compared to how the x is changing. Okay, the y-intercept is where the line of our graph crosses the y-axis, and the y-axis is the vertical line on our graph. Okay, the initial value we can say it's where it starts, meaning the information, where the information starts. It's also known as the y-intercept. So for example, if Miss Wardlow is opening up a savings account, to start her savings account, she put in $500. And then every month after that, she added $100. How much is it changing every month? $100, right? So after 5 months, how much money should I have saved? 500 is how much I put in total, right? Per month. But how much would I have completely in my account? 1,000, because I started with that 500, which would be what we would call my initial value. And if I were graphing it, it would be my y-intercept. Okay, and the rate of change is another way of saying what? Slope. It's just how the values are changing, one measurement compared to another measurement. Okay, so equations. We have talked about this just a little bit. Does anybody remember what the m represents, or the value with x represents? It's the slope. And what is another term that we just said is for slope? Please make that note underneath it. It is important to know that oftentimes whenever they ask you what is the rate of change, it's just the slope that you need to be looking for. Okay, so if this is the slope, then what is b? What is that representing? The y-intercept. And what is another term for the y-intercept? Initial value. The y-intercept is also known as the initial value. It's what we start talking about for that first quadrant, for all our positive values. Okay, so now let's identify those in different representations. The first one we'll look at is identifying it on a graph. Okay, so they ask about the y-intercept first because that's where it crosses the y-axis. The y-axis is always that vertical line, okay? So this is the y-axis here, this vertical one. Okay, so where is this diagonal line crossing the y-axis at? What value? It's crossing at 5, so put a point on 5. Draw an arrow to it and label it the y-intercept. I will zoom in onto that graph. So the y-intercept is the number 5. Make sure you write that on the blank. Okay, now we need to find out what is the slope, right? That's our next question. Okay, slope is our rate of change. We're just in how to find slope, find the change in y, and divide it by the change in x. Okay, that means that we need to find some slope triangles, right? That means we need to find another point on this graph. Where's another whole number point located? What do you mean 2?
In the middle and above 2.
Here?
Like to the right one.
Here? Okay. So you mean at the ordered pair 1, 2. Okay. And so here's another ordered pair on that line. And if you continue that, it goes all the way down the same amount of space each time because the slope is the same on that line all the way up it, right? Okay, so you could use any of those 2 points to find the slope. Okay, it's easy just to start here. What is the rise? And what is the run? Okay, and then looking at this line, is this decreasing or increasing? Decreasing, so that means that the slope is negative. So our slope here is 3 over 1. We know it's negative, so it's negative 3. Okay, so now we're going to put that information over here. The slope, it reduced to negative 3. Okay, we're going to use our information in this box. Y in the x, so y equals something x plus something else is always the order. So y equals, what is the slope? So put negative 3 with the x, and what is the intercept? 5, so put plus 5. Okay, so now I want you to label these. Negative 3 is the slope, and 5 is the y-intercept. Okay, on a table. Okay, so first, it says, what is the y-intercept? It's where it crosses the y-axis, right? Well, anytime that you're on the y-axis, what is x equal to? What is this value here at the origin? So if we're at 0 for x, then the y value is on the y-axis, right? So anytime you're looking for the y-intercept, it's where x is equal to 0. Make yourself a note. Y-intercept is where x is 0. So what is the y-intercept here? What's the output, guys? 4. All right, so the y-intercept is 0. I'm sorry, the y-intercept is where x is equal to 0, so it's 4. And now we need to find the rate of change, the slope. So what is the y value changing by each time? 4. It's increasing by 4 each time. And what are the x values changing by each time? Okay, so change in y over the change in x. So we've got 4 divided by 5. Okay, so I'm going to leave that in fraction form, and that's our slope. Now we need to write the equation. It's y equals what? What is the slope? 4/5 x. What's the y-intercept? 4, and it's positive 4, right? Positive, we use a plus sign, so plus 4. I'm going to zoom in on that. All right, now we're going to talk about word problems. Ben put his daughter in daycare. It costs $50 to enroll her and $186 per week. Make sure you underline those. Those are important to us, right? Okay, does he pay the $50 more than once? No. No. So what does that mean this is? If it only happens one time, is it the slope or is it the intercept? This is the intercept. Okay, so this happens every single week. So $186 per week is the slope. Okay, and remember, y-intercept is also known as the what? Initial value. So what is the initial value? 50. What is the rate of change? 186. So now let's write the equation. The equation is y equals, what's the slope? 186x. What's the intercept? So plus 50.